I don't know how I feel. It's midnight, and I'm suffocating in my own bedroom. The air seems too thick, pressing on my chest until I can't tell where my heartbeat ends and my panic begins. A single glow from my laptop screen flickers across the walls, pulsing, dimming, casting shadows that twist around the bed frame. God, I feel like I'm standing at the coffin of something precious, like I've already lost what I once called my life. I sit up, gasping for breath, trying to convince myself I'm just tired, that it's all in my head. But I know the truth. I haven't slept a full night in weeks. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. Her. Him. The betrayal. Let me backtrack to the night it happened, or at least the night I discovered it in full, undeniable clarity. I'm a singer-songwriter in Nashville, though I was born in Pittsburgh, so I carry that steel-town grit in my bones. My wife, Maggie, has been my anchor for years. The voice I'd hear cheering me on when I was busking on corner stages, the first person I'd text when a new gig came up. She's from Atlanta, polite and warm in that southern way. Beautiful, too. Brown eyes that used to soften whenever I walked in the room. I swear I used to believe I'd won the lottery by marrying her. Then, not so long ago, she started going cold, like the pilot light of her warmth flickered out overnight. At first, I told myself it was her job. She's an event planner, always busy, always on the phone. Deadlines stacked on top of each other, clients barking orders. It happens, I told myself. People get stressed. But one night, I was in our dimly lit living room, flipping through channels. The TV's glow was the only thing lighting up the space. Maggie stood in the doorway, phone in hand. She had that guilty look, like she'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "Who's calling you this late?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She gave me a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. A new client. Nothing major. I nodded but felt something tighten in my gut. It's strange how you know, deep down, when something's off. Maybe I'd always known. Maybe I was just too scared to acknowledge it. A few days later, a package arrived. I heard the doorbell, and I left my guitar leaning against the sofa. As I approached the door, I could see Maggie through the side window. She was talking to a courier, a guy I'd never seen before. Mid-30s, lean, with an easy stance. The weird thing was how they spoke. Hushed voices, quick glances. Then I heard him say it. Margaret Hill, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not Maggie Donovan, not Mrs. Donovan, but Margaret Hill, as if she belonged to him, or with him. The name caught me like a punch to the ribs. She stiffened, tried to hush him, and quickly signed for the delivery. He glanced at me through the window, gave a half-smile, apologetic, almost, then disappeared down the walkway. I stood in the hall, not sure whether to confront her or pretend it didn't happen. My heart hammered so loud I was sure she could hear it, but I stayed silent. That night, we barely spoke. She insisted it was just a confusion with the shipping label, a simple mix-up. Our conversation went like this. "So, the delivery guy called you Margaret Hill." She forced a laugh. "Maybe the warehouse messed up my name. You know how incompetent some shipping companies can be." I studied her eyes. He didn't look confused. She shrugged. "John, what do you want me to say?" I paused. "I want the truth." She turned her back on me and walked into the bedroom. I stood there in the dimly lit living room. TV flickering again, the volume turned low, my brain reeling. Logic told me something was deeply wrong. Still, I didn't press further that night. I let the silence wrap itself around us like a suffocating blanket. A week later, I found a small slip of paper in her purse. It was a receipt for a motel 2 blocks from a photography studio across town. My stomach sank when I realized the date matched a day she claimed she was scouting venues. I wanted to tear that paper to shreds, burn it, pretend it didn't exist. But I kept it in my pocket. Proof. The next day, she was rushing out the door. "I'll be late tonight," she said. "I've got a client meeting, then a site inspection for a big event." Her tone was crisp, as if daring me to question her. I just nodded, thinking, I'll follow her. I told myself it was crazy, that I was turning into a paranoid husband, but logic won out. If something was going on, I needed to see it with my own eyes. So that evening, I climbed into my dusty truck and parked a few blocks from her office. Sure enough, around 7 p.m., she emerged in a sleek black dress that I recognized from nights she used to reserve for our dates that hadn't happened in forever. My heart was pounding, but a cold, hard resolve chilled my limbs. One streetlight flickered overhead, painting the sidewalk in an ominous glow. She got into her car, started driving. I followed from a distance. My palms were sweaty on the steering wheel. I felt like an amateur detective in a bad movie. But the tension was real. My chest hurt. She pulled into a small motel parking lot. Not the plush hotels where her clients typically host events. This place was older, the neon VACANCUE sign partially burned out. I watched her get out, glance around. Then a figure approached, tall, lean, wearing a worn jacket. The streetlight caught his face. The courier. That same, half-apologetic smile. But this time, he beamed when he saw her. She walked to him like they'd done this a dozen times, like they had a routine. He leaned in, his arm around her waist, guiding her inside. I wanted to leave, to run, to scream. Instead, I sat there, fists clenched on the steering wheel, until my knuckles went pale. The logic part of me said, now you know for sure. The emotional part wanted to kick the door down, confront them both. But fear, that damned fear, kept me pinned to my seat. I was too shaken to move. So I waited. 20 minutes. 30. 45. My foot tapped the floor mat to the ticking clock on the dashboard. Each minute that passed was a blade digging deeper into my pride. Finally, I couldn't take it. I killed the truck's engine and slipped across the parking lot, heart pounding. Light seeped from a thin slit in the curtains of room 12. I should have turned around. I should have respected my own sanity. But I leaned in, just enough to glance through that thin gap. Inside, the bed was rumpled, the sheets half off. She was in his arms, the two of them locked together in a slow, intimate dance of betrayal. It wasn't about words. It was about bare skin meeting bare skin, about the quiet, breathy moans that I had never heard from her in months. There was an intensity, a closeness. My wife pressed against his chest, eyes closed, lips parted in a soft gasp that said more than any confession could. I froze. My body felt numb. My mind flared with the image, branding it into my memory like a sick tattoo. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the curb. I wanted to vomit. I heard my own ragged breathing. Each exhale was a mixture of fury, heartbreak, and a twisted sense of fascination, like watching a train wreck and being unable to look away. A strangled sound escaped my throat, but I stifled it, staggering to my truck. When I finally returned home, the bedroom felt like a coffin indeed, small, claustrophobic. I was burying my illusions. Everything we built, everything I believed, was rotting under the weight of her betrayal. I paced in the darkness, my thoughts colliding at full speed. My lungs ached. I had to open a window just to gulp fresh air. The next day, she came home around noon, claiming she'd had an emergency meeting. She avoided my gaze, heading straight to the shower, murmuring a greeting so casual it stung. I followed her to the bathroom door and called her out, first gently, then with staccato questions. Her responses came quick, defensive, riddled with obvious lies. She said she'd been with a client. I asked for proof. She said they'd parted ways at 9 p.m. I asked for a photo of that meeting, an email, a text. She floundered, trying to plug the holes in her story with half-baked excuses. My heart hammered, anger welling up to replace the heartbreak. You can't even keep your own story straight, I shouted, my voice echoing in the tiled hallway. She slammed the door. Why are you interrogating me like this? I pressed my forehead to the wood, speaking through clenched teeth, because I know what's going on. Silence from the other side. A beat, 2 beats. Then the water turned on, drowning any final words she might have had. When she emerged from the shower, I was sitting on the edge of our bed, my arms folded. I confronted her plainly, describing the motel, the courier, all of it. She stared at me, lips parted, searching for some retort that never came. Eventually, she just sank onto the bed, face hidden in her hands. I expected sobs or screams or denials. Instead, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen." I waited, hoping she'd explain, maybe give me a reason that could at least make sense of the madness. But all she managed to say was, "It started months ago. I felt alone. You were so busy with your music. I don't know. It just happened." "Please, John, I didn't mean to hurt you." That's when the anger gave way to pity, then shock, swirling in my gut like a storm. I could see she was ashamed, but that didn't undo the images seared into my memory. I felt my mouth go dry. All I could do was stand up, numb, and walk away. I left the house. Needed air. I took my guitar to a rundown bar on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where the regulars talk too loudly and the neon sign blinks like a dying star. I asked the bartender if I could play a few songs. Just me, no microphone. He shrugged, said go for it. So I sat in a corner and let my heart bleed onto the strings. The lyrics came out raw, about betrayal and heartbreak, about seeing your wife in another man's arms. Each chord stung my fingertips, and each note tasted like regret. A small crowd formed. People listened, some even clapped. Nobody knew the story behind my trembling voice. That was my first moment of release. Hurting, yes, but at least I could turn pain into something. When I stumbled home, the house was dark. Maggie was curled in bed, or maybe pretending to be. I slipped under the covers without a word. My lungs felt heavy again, like I was breathing underwater. That night, I dreamed of the motel's yellowed curtains. I dreamed of her moans, an echo I couldn't shut out. The next morning, we barely talked. She got dressed for work, doing her hair meticulously as if life was normal. I stared at my phone, scrolling aimlessly, ignoring the tension that thickened the air. That's when I found the email. An order confirmation for a DNA test kit. I'd purchased it the week before, a rash decision made at 3 a.m. after reading horror stories online. At the time, I suspected something deeper, like maybe I wasn't the father of a child I'd always believed was mine. The problem was, we don't have children. Maggie and I were trying, or so I thought, but it hadn't happened yet. So why the test? Because in my sleepless haze, I felt the need to confirm something. Anything. Turned out, part of me wanted to see if she was pregnant, or if she had lied about something else entirely. Infidelity tears logic apart, so I'd latched onto the idea of a test to confirm I wasn't crazy. The kit arrived 2 weeks later, but ironically, the truth was already in front of me. Days passed like that, cold, mechanical. She'd leave for her job, come home. We lived like two strangers with an unspoken war raging between us. I started writing more songs, each lyric sharper than the last. Bitterness dripped from every verse. If she read any of them, she never said. Maybe she knew. Maybe she felt every pointed phrase like a jab to her guilty conscience. Then, one afternoon, that same courier, Marcus Hill, showed up at our door again. I heard the muffled conversation from the next room. I peeked around the corner to see him holding a package, eyes cast downward. She took it, face pale. For a moment, they stood there like two kids caught stealing. I stepped forward, arms folded. Marcus's gaze slid to mine, a flicker of remorse in his eyes. He managed a tight nod, then retreated to his truck. I stared at Maggie. Her lips trembled. We didn't speak a word. That night, she tried to talk. She even put a hand on my shoulder as I was strumming a half-finished melody. John, about the test. And everything else. We need to sort this out. I closed my eyes, letting the guitar notes fade. Sort what out? You lied. You cheated. That's sordid. That's not fair, she said, voice shaky. I know what I did was wrong. But you withdrew from me, long before any of this started. You chose your music over me. You shut me out. I slammed the guitar case shut. So you jumped in bed with the first random guy who gave you attention. She winced. He wasn't random. I felt a connection, a kindness you stopped giving me. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. The anger flared again. Then pity, then shock. The cycle repeated. I wanted to scream that she was lying, that I'd never turned my back on her, but the words stuck. Maybe I was partially to blame. But I'd never do what she did. Never cross that line. After she left the room, I locked myself in the bathroom. The mirror reflected a man I barely recognized. Messy hair, bloodshot eyes, jaw clenched. I looked like someone forced to stand in front of his own funeral. That night, I slept on the couch, or tried to. My mind was a landfill of images, regrets, accusations. Eventually, the DNA test arrived. Not the standard paternal kit, more like a test to confirm if I was genetically predisposed to any medical conditions. My late-night delirium had apparently made me click the wrong thing. But seeing that box was a harsh reminder of how paranoid I'd become. Of how I'd lost my sense of stability, my sense of rational self. Everything was broken. Time passed, a slow ache that pressed on me day by day. I channeled my pain into lyrics, each line more spiteful than the last. People began to notice. My local gigs turned into small showcases of heartbreak anthems. Audiences connected with the rawness. They'd come up afterward, pat me on the back. Man, I felt that, they'd say. And I'd nod, hollow inside. I wrote a savage ballad about a backstabbing lover, painting her silhouette in the darkest brushstrokes my imagination could conjure. People asked if it was real. I'd just shrug, half smiling. Maggie, maybe out of guilt, tried to extend olive branches. She offered to help with a show or posted supportive messages online about my music. But it all felt forced, like we were playing roles in a drama that refused to end. I avoided her attempts at conversation, let the silence weigh heavier each day. She started sleeping in the guest room. One night, I got an unexpected text from Marcus. I want to talk. Man to man. I stared at the phone, adrenaline surging. I had never given him my number, so he must have rummaged through Maggie's phone or found some other cunning way. My first instinct was to block him, but a toxic curiosity made me type back. Fine. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., at the bar on 3rd Street, he agreed. The next evening, I walked into that grimy bar, scanned the faces until I spotted him in a corner booth, shoulders hunched like he didn't want to be recognized. I slid into the seat across from him, heart hammering. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his chin. We sat there in uncomfortable silence. Eventually, he spoke. I'm sorry, he said, voice low. I never meant to ruin your marriage. I let out a humorless laugh. Then what exactly did you intend? He stared at his hands. We met when I delivered some packages for her events. We got to talking. She seemed lonely. One thing led to another. My jaw clenched. Spare me the details. I felt a wave of anger cresting, but I forced it down. Why'd you text me? He exhaled shakily. I just wanted you to know. I'm ending it. She's made it clear she wants to fix things with you. I folded my arms. Has she? He nodded, meeting my eyes for the first time. Yes, she ended it weeks ago, actually. I couldn't let go. But now, she told me not to see her again. The bizarre mixture of relief and rage churned in my chest. So you want a pat on the back. You want me to thank you for stepping away from my wife. He shook his head. No, I just needed you to know that I'm leaving Nashville. I got a job offer back home in Seattle. That's all. I stared at the man, searching his face for some sign of sincerity. You realize you destroyed something. You took something I cared about." He nodded, eyes wet. "I know. And I have to live with that." He stood up, left a few bills on the table, and walked away without another word. I sat there, chest tight, listening to the clink of glasses and the muttered conversations around me. My mind was on fire. Maggie had ended it. She'd never told me. Did she think it would magically fix everything? When I got home, she was in the living room, lights dimmed, TV off. She looked up at me, tears staining her cheeks. "You saw him, didn't you?" I tossed my keys on the coffee table. "Yeah." She ran a hand through her hair, voice trembling. "I wanted to tell you it was over. I couldn't find the words." Anger flared. "You couldn't find the words to say you stopped sleeping with another man. That's a conversation that needs to happen, Maggie." She stood up, stepped closer. "John, I know you probably can't forgive me, but I'm done with him. I want to fix us, if that's even possible." I studied her face. She looked sincere, heartbreakingly so. But the memory of that motel room refused to fade. "I'm not sure I can ever forgive you," I said, voice shaking, "but let's see if I can live with it." We tried. For the next few weeks, we tiptoed around each other, trying to mend something that felt irreparably shattered. My songs grew more venomous. I sang about revenge, betrayal. Audiences devoured it. My gigs started drawing bigger crowds. One of my tracks went semi-viral on social media. People latched onto the raw fury in my lyrics, projecting their own heartbreak onto my words. And that's when the strangest thing happened. My music began to overshadow everything else. I was no longer just a local musician. I was the guy who wrote about betrayal with such visceral emotion that it cut people to the core. I found that I could direct my rage into humiliating the memory of Marcus, turning him into a caricature in my songs. And people loved it. They'd come up afterward, tears in their eyes, telling me stories of how they'd been betrayed too. I realized I was building a twisted empire on my pain. All the while, Maggie tried to reach out. She'd ask about the songs, about how I was doing. I'd brush her off, bury myself in the creative process. Anger replaced the heartbreak, or maybe layered itself on top. I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for payback, even if that payback was purely in my lyrics. Eventually, I recorded a studio version of my darkest song, the one describing the lover as a scavenger picking at a corpse, painting him as a worthless parasite. The track hit a nerve with listeners, especially older men who'd gone through divorces or heartbreak. Before long, a local radio station picked it up, then a bigger station. Soon, I was invited onto podcasts. People praised my honest portrayal of masculine pain. It was exhilarating and horrifying, because deep down, every time I sang, I relived the betrayal. Each performance forced me to marinate in the memory of that motel window, of her body pressed against his. It was the ultimate revenge, immortalizing him as a villain, but it corroded me from within. I started having nightmares where the lines between the stage and that motel blurred. My guitar strings would turn into barbed wire, cutting my fingers until blood dripped. I'd wake up gasping, the sheets soaked in sweat. Maggie sensed it. She'd lie awake next to me, whispering, "John, please, it's killing you. Let it go." But I couldn't. I'd turn away, hoping sleep would claim me. Then came the DNA test fiasco. Even though it wasn't for paternity, it arrived with a sense of finality, a symbolic blow. I stared at that kid on our kitchen table, thinking of the countless ways distrust had manifested in me, thinking how I'd become a man I hardly recognized. Maggie walked in, eyes lingering on the box. "So you really thought I might have been pregnant with his child?" I closed my eyes, shame surging. I didn't know what to think. She ran her fingers over the cardboard, voice trembling. "This is how bad things have gotten. You can't even trust reality anymore." I wanted to scream that I was the victim, that she had no right to question my paranoia. But I could see the heartbreak in her eyes. It was different from guilt, like she was watching me unravel and didn't know how to save me. So I just said nothing. One evening, an old friend of mine who owned a small recording studio invited me to do a full album. He believed we could crowdfund it, build on the momentum. This was everything I'd ever dreamed. A real shot at a breakout. But the songs fueling it all were about betrayal, vengeance, heartbreak. The more I poured venom into the microphone, the more the audience wanted. I found myself rewriting lines to be even harsher, even crueler. My friend insisted. That raw honesty is what sells. So I kept going, each track an act of emotional self-immolation. Maggie tried to talk to me one night while I was hunched over my guitar, tinkering with a new chord progression. "John, you're basically feeding off the worst thing that's ever happened to us. It's not healthy." I turned to her, eyes burning. "It's all I have left. Without this pain, I'm just a fool with a guitar who got cheated on." She flinched, tears forming, then turned and left the room. She didn't argue. She understood it on some level. I was taking revenge the only way I knew how, painting the man who betrayed me, and the woman who helped, as black and vile as my words could make them. The audience, especially older folks who'd been through rocky marriages, kept cheering me on. I was their hero, the man who dared to turn heartbreak into a public anthem. But with each performance, I felt something slip deeper into a pit of bitterness. Months passed. Marcus was gone. Maggie and I lived in a stalemate, occasionally sharing moments of tense civility, like roommates who tolerated each other. Then, on the eve of my album release, a local TV station asked me to appear on a primetime segment, performing a new single and speaking about the deeply personal story behind the songs. That invitation felt like a final step toward bigger success. I wanted it. I was terrified of it. The station insisted on drama. They wanted me to talk about infidelity, heartbreak, the works. I said yes, ignoring the knot in my stomach. The night before the broadcast, Maggie found me in the living room, pacing by the window. Her eyes were puffy. "John, please, don't do this." I clenched my jaw. "Do what?" "Don't turn our private hell into a spectacle on TV. Don't humiliate us both in front of millions." I raked a hand through my hair. "You worried about your reputation now? Afraid your parents might see?" She shook her head. "I'm worried about you. About us." She reached for my hand, and for a moment, I let her hold it. Her fingers trembled. "You're not the man I fell in love with. You're so consumed by hate." I laughed bitterly. "Because you broke me." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I know. But if you go on that show and tear us both open for the world, it'll be the final nail. You won't come back from that." I pulled my hand free, stormed out of the house. I spent the night in the studio, staring at the track list, replaying each savage lyric in my head. I felt both triumphant and disgusted. The next day, I arrived at the TV station. Bright lights, stage managers rushing around, the green room abuzz with chatter. My stomach churned. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. They queued me up. First I'd perform a new single, then answer questions about the inspiration. The camera's red light blinked on. My guitar felt heavier than usual. The host introduced me as the raw, fearless voice of heartbreak. I forced a polite smile, though my chest was tight. I started playing the new track, a cold, deliberate tune about a cheating lover. Halfway through the second verse, I locked up. My fingers stumbled. The memory of Maggie in that motel room flooded me, the curve of her body against Marcus. My voice cracked. A wave of shame burned through me. I couldn't do it. Not like this. My vision blurred with tears. The audience, confused, watched as I strummed the final chord and let the music die prematurely. The host cut in, voice bright with forced cheer. That was quite powerful. "Are you all right, John?" I swallowed hard, tears threatening to roll down my cheeks on live TV. My voice wavered. I came here to talk about betrayal. But what I never admitted is, I've been betraying myself all this time, using pain to hurt someone who I still care about. A hush fell over the studio. I closed my eyes, inhaled sharply. Yes, I was cheated on. It broke me. But these songs, they aren't just a reflection of heartbreak. They're an act of revenge. And I'm paying for it every time I sing them. Silence. The audience didn't know what to make of my confession. The host tried to prompt me with a question, but I wasn't hearing it. I murmured, "I'm sorry," into the microphone, not sure to whom. To Maggie, to myself, to everyone. Then I walked off stage. Cameras followed me, but I didn't look back. I drove home as fast as I could, adrenaline tearing through my veins. When I pulled into the driveway, Maggie was on the porch, eyes wide, phone in hand. She'd been watching the broadcast. Her face was wet with tears, but for once, they didn't look like tears of guilt. They looked like relief. I stumbled out of the car, my guitar case banging against my leg. "Did you see?" I asked, my throat dry. She nodded. "Yeah." I set the guitar down on the porch step. I humiliated myself. She wiped her eyes. "You told the truth." My pulse thundered in my ears. "Maggie, I can't keep punishing us both. I just can't." She hesitated, then took a careful step closer. "What does that mean?" I sank down on the porch, leaning my back against the rail, panting like I'd run a marathon. After a few seconds, I spoke, voice low, almost a whisper. "I can't stay stuck in that night at the motel window. I'll never forget what happened. But if I don't stop fueling my life with bitterness, I'll lose what little remains of myself." Tears welled in her eyes again. "John, I'm so sorry." I nodded, feeling raw. "Me too." And in that moment, we just sat there under the fading evening sky, not touching but not running either. Maybe this was the start of letting some of that pain go. Or maybe it was just the first step in acknowledging that we had to face the consequences head-on. Therapy, honesty, a complete reckoning. I didn't know if we'd survive as a couple. But I did know I couldn't live solely in the shadows of revenge anymore. A few weeks passed, and I found that my shows changed. The songs I'd recorded were still out there, playing on the radio, but I started writing new ones, songs that acknowledged heartbreak, but also the glimmer of something beyond it. My audience changed, too. Some still wanted the raw anger, but others embraced the vulnerability of a man who'd been shattered and was trying to put himself back together. I found a strange sense of peace in that, a sense of personal evolution. Maggie and I began talking again, this time without the usual storms of accusation. She admitted she felt invisible in our marriage, that I'd shut down emotionally long before she'd found comfort in Marcus. I admitted I got so lost in my music that I forgot to be a husband. It didn't justify her betrayal, but at least we spoke without screaming. The ring on my finger felt heavy with complicated meaning. Part of me wanted to tear it off, throw it away, forget we ever tried. Another part recognized that real forgiveness, if it came, would be the hardest and most necessary step for me to regain my soul. Eventually, we decided to attend counseling sessions. I wasn't convinced it would fix us. Maybe we'd end up splitting. But I had to try, if only to salvage what was left of my dignity. We sat side by side in a small office, softly lit, the counselor asking questions about our childhoods, our dreams, the day we met. Maggie's eyes glistened as she remembered the first time she heard me perform. She said she'd never seen someone so passionate. That's what drew her in. And I recalled how she used to stand at the edge of every stage, cheering, her eyes shining with pride. We both cried that day, not out of anger, but out of mourning for what we'd lost, and maybe hope for what we could still salvage. My album eventually dropped, overshadowed by my meltdown on live TV. Critics called me hauntingly authentic, but some fans felt betrayed by my sudden shift away from vengeance. Ironically, the meltdown fueled more press. I got interview requests from bigger outlets. People wanted to see the man who realized, in the middle of a performance, that he was destroying himself. Part of me wanted to accept every invite, to rebuild my career. Another part wanted to vanish into a quiet life, away from the gossip. In the end, I did a few interviews but refused to delve into graphic details about Maggie or Marcus. I just said, "We're working through it," and left it at that. If the press hungered for more scandal, too bad. Sometimes, I still picture that motel room. A tightness grips my chest, and I'm filled with that old swirl of anger, pity, shock. But these days, I'm better at breathing through it. Better at remembering that if I stay locked in that bitterness, I'll lose myself. My revenge was writing those songs, exposing my pain to the world, and it took a heavy toll on me. I found success, but nearly lost my soul in the process. The cost was too high. Maggie and I are still trying to figure out where we stand. We have good days and terrible days. We share painful honesty in counseling sessions. We navigate the awkwardness of intimacy, the tremors of trust. I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we were, or even if we should. But at least we're not burying our heads in the sand anymore. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up gasping, still fighting the sensation of suffocation. But Maggie's there, if only in the next room, or occasionally beside me, murmuring that I'm safe, that we're safe. I still see the ghost of that betrayal in her eyes, and she sees the ghost of resentment in mine. We're both haunted, stumbling through the dark together, waiting for the flicker of dawn. People ask me if I regret writing those songs, turning my wife and her lover into lyrical monsters. I usually pause, because the truth is complicated. My music saved me from drowning in silence, but it also chained me to the darkest moment of my life. If I could go back, maybe I'd handle it differently. But regrets won't change the past. I can only move forward, a step at a time. Every so often, I think about Marcus, the man with the apologetic smile. He left Nashville, presumably returning to Seattle. I wonder if he ever thinks about me, about the chaos he set in motion. But it doesn't matter. If he's out there, I hope he finds whatever redemption he's looking for, just as I'm stumbling toward my own. There's a point, late at night, when the applause fades and the house is quiet, that I realize I'm still the man who was betrayed. Still the man who turned that betrayal into a weapon of art. Still the man who can't fully forget. But I've learned how to carry him differently now. Less like a burden, more like a scar that doesn't define me but remains part of my story. And so here I am, alive. Hurt, changed, but alive. The bedroom still feels heavy sometimes, the air still thick with memories. But I crack the window to let the night breeze in, breathe deeply, and remind myself I'm no longer suffocating. Maybe one day, I'll truly be free. Until then, I keep breathing, keep writing, keep living, because that's all any of us can do when love dies, and we decide to keep on living anyway.